Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining us for this fourth episode of the 5 Conversations, Tough Talks with Aging Relatives. Excited you're here to join us today for, again, another very important conversation. We've titled it, You Can't Take Both Sets of China, Mom, right? Last week we talked with several experts, including Nicole Emico-Kane and Allison Schreier, who shared with us ideas for how to have the conversation, Mom, it's time to move. It's just not working for you to be at home, or Mom, we need to have someone come in and help you out, like a home care agency, come and help you out. In this episode, we're specifically going to go down the track now of having to move into assisted living, memory care, an adult family home, an independent living, some other setting. And how do we have the tough conversations around, all right, we can't take everything here. There's going to have to be stuff we leave behind. How do we have that very difficult conversation? And how do we say our first goodbye? We've helped Mom unpack. What are we going to do? My name is Benjamin Sermi, and I'm a social gerontologist, and I'm eager to be your host today. So excited to be with you. Quick housekeeping note. The first of its kind caregivers care package designed by a licensed clinical therapist is the giveaway for this month of June. And we are also giving away the Caregivers Journal, which is a journal designed to help you bring balance into your life when you care for someone else. So we're giving those away. The only thing you have to do is at the end, just leave your feedback on the presentation. We read every comment and we try to understand how to make these more valuable. Quick thank you to the Kelsch family for sponsoring. Allison Emmett Kelsch sold everything they had to buy an abandoned nursing home back in the 1950s in Kelso, Washington. They went on to build one of America's very first assisted living communities to create a way for elders to continue to have freedom and independence versus living in a traditional skilled nursing setting. Their family has gone on to do the same thing in 8 states across the United States, creating memory care with reminiscing features and creating independent living communities with amazing amenities. That's our second guest. Our first guest today is Mai Thompson. Mai Thompson is the president and founder of Smooth Transitions. She launched it in order to fill a gap for seniors who have decided to downsize and need assistance. Smooth Transitions has the experience and expertise to make all these downsizing tasks a little bit easier. She has an engineering degree and has a lot of systems experience, and she puts that into use to help seniors and their adult children navigate the challenges of a move or of an estate dispersal. It isn't just about the stuff, but understanding how hard it can be to manage a lifetime of memories and belongings when downsizing. Mai, we'd love to have you join us now.
Hi, Benjamin. Thank you so much. Thank you for the Kelsch community and Benjamin and Paige Fairbanks-Gunn for the opportunity and the invitation to be here. I really appreciate it. I think this video series is really, really important, and I'm just thankful to be part of the conversation. So thank you.
You got it.
As Benjamin said, I am the owner of Smooth Transitions. We are a senior move management company. So we help our clients with the entire process of their transition, whether they're moving into independent, assisted living, or memory care. And because of that, being able to help hundreds of families through the years, we're able to really share stories and tips and to guide along our families through this process. And so today I'm really hoping just to share some tips and advice here. In general, our outline is going to be, we're moving, now what? Then we're going to talk about downsizing and right sizing, what that means, and the problem with that, what our ultimate goal is, and then as well as tips, and we'll share that through stories and pictures. So as Benjamin stated before, the series for that we're having right now up until this point has been about noticing some changes with mom and dad, realizing that maybe from a safety standpoint, we need to start getting involved, and they're talking about different conversations, maybe taking away their checkbook or their car keys. And so now up to this point, the decision has been made that we will move. And so now we're moving. So now what? What do we need to do next? A lot of our families are overwhelmed when they start talking to us and they don't know where to start. When we're talking about downsizing and right sizing, many of our families, many of our clients are moving from, just a bigger house. It could be a 2, 3, 4 bedroom house, and then they're moving into a senior living community. So whether that's, a 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom apartment or studio, generally speaking, they will need to pare down some of their items. And we do this through the process of sorting. And so when we're talking about downsizing and right sizing, when we do this through sorting, it's the 5 main things that we are looking at. You want to look at your items in the category of, is this something that we're taking to the community? Or is this something that we're going to give to family? The third thing is this something that we could sell and then donate or dispose of? So those are the 5 things that we're looking at when we're sorting through our clients' homes. And you may think, well, what's the big deal? That sounds pretty easy. But actually what happens is, when we move, regardless of any age, that process is very, very stressful. There's lots to manage, lots of decision making, just a lot to do. And so because of that, it's stressful. But on our clients, and as we age, the moving process becomes a lot more stressful. And the reasons are because, maybe for one, our health, maybe we're not able to do all the lifting, the packing, the unpacking. We're not physically able to do as much as we were before. And then also just maybe the stamina, maybe we can't go all day sorting. It's a very stressful, emotional time. And so maybe we can only work for maybe an hour or 2 a day. So then that also makes it really difficult, especially if we're trying to hit a certain schedule for the move. The other part is, family. Some of our families do have conflict. They are not in agreement about what mom or dad needs to do. And so this also creates a lot of stress. In addition to maybe the spouse is not feeling well, and so the other person has to be their caregiver. And in that case, again, with their time and their energy, they're not able to do as much as they need to do to make this a successful transition. So the third thing why it's difficult for seniors for the downsizing and moving is because just the emotional aspect. Many of our clients have lived in their home for 20, 30, 40 years. And as a result, they've accumulated lots of things, but also lots of memories. And so when we're talking about paring down our items, it is a very emotional, it's to them, it's really, really difficult. Emotionally having to decide what can I part with? What can I give to family? What can I sell? And so that whole process in itself is really, really difficult. And so when we're talking about, tips for downsizing, these are the problems that we're having. But just know that ultimately our goal is for our seniors and their families to have a smooth transition to their community. We want them moved so that they're able to thrive in their new community. We want to see them, being involved in activities, meeting new friends, and just being able to thrive. And so that's our ultimate goal is basically for our clients' safety and also their well-being. So those are the main things that I focus on when I think about planning their move. So the next part is we're just going to give some tips, and this is just based upon our moves that we did in the past. I kind of just picked some things that I felt that would be helpful for maybe people in the audience, for them to either help their family, or if you can just pick 1 or 2 things that was meaningful to you that you could use for yourself or for a family member or for a friend. the first tip I have is when we're thinking about sorting and deciding what furniture we will take, that is probably the very first step I would recommend. And the reason is because then you'll have peace of mind. You'll know what furniture will go and where it will go. Some people say, well, I can see that they're stressed because they're just not sure if their furniture will fit. So they will lose some sleep because of that. Or I'll have people say, well, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out on move day. When the movers get here, we'll try to put as much as we can and we'll just figure it out. So when we're recommending a space plan, it's basically looking at your furniture pieces, looking at the layout of your new community. You kind of basically have maybe a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, but it's going through the process of identifying items that we want to take and then finding a home for it. So whether, you call it, some people call it space plan or floor plan or a layout, it's generally the idea is finding a home for your furniture. And the reason that's important is, one, it gives you peace of mind, knowing that, these are the furniture pieces that I will take. And it also saves you time and money. When the movers get there, if we bring too much and there's not a home or place for it to safely put your furniture, they'll have to bring it back. So whether they bring it back to your house or to the closest donation facility, that additional time will cost you more in mover expenses. So think about that. But then in addition to that, if we know where the furniture is going to go, then we also know what furniture is that we're not taking. So then that gives us the opportunity to decide ahead of time, do we want to give this to family? Do we want to sell it or donate it to a great cause? But then it gives you options. Instead of last minute decision making, take it to the next donation facility that we can. So what I'm recommending is just more an objective approach to this. I've met with some people, they asked me to do a floor plan for mom because mom wants to take it all. Just, help her create a floor plan. And so I would create one. We did this one last year. We went to her house and she showed me everything that she wanted. And sure enough, it all fit. So she was right. Everything that she wanted to take did fit. But what that helps is it helps move the conversation forward. The son and daughter, the son is not fighting with his mom about taking everything. It's just a more objective approach to it, and it helps keep the conversation moving forward. So those are my tips for the floor plan. But if you see here's an example of one that we did. This lady was a really, she loved to read. So she has 2 areas in her home where she's reading. She has a couple of reading chairs and book areas for her books. But the most important part of this exercise that we did together is on the bottom is identifying items that she's not taking. So there's a couple more reading chairs that she wants to take and pieces of furniture where we realized that there's really no room for it for us to safely put it, which is okay, but at least we can make that decision and then move forward. So this is just an example of a floor plan and the benefits for that. The next slide that we have is when we're sorting and thinking about what we want to take to the community, it's really important to think about it from the senior's point of view, because ultimately it is their home. This is where they're going to be living. So we want to really be compassionate about that. What I bring is not what the next person would bring, right? Because it's their home. We want to make it theirs. So to consider from their standpoint what they want to take. And this, with this client that we worked with, we were packing and sorting her home, and we found this underneath her bed. And I don't know, Benjamin, can we do like can I ask them just on the chat if they have ideas of what we found underneath the bed?
Absolutely. Yes. In the chat. Click on chat and put your answers in. What was underneath the bed?
Yeah, so what do we find underneath the bed? One person found it, and we all were kind of, this is the first time we've seen something like this, so we were in shock. And this is an example. Okay, old clothes. Thank you. So this is an example of something where maybe one person wouldn't bring it, but then someone else would. So what we found here underneath the bed was a mannequin arm, and it was just kind of like a stuffed arm. And I brought it to a dead pet. Sorry, yeah. Thankfully, no. So I just brought it to the client and just said, hey, this is what we found. And she took the arm and just hugged it, and she was so thankful, and her face just lit up. She just said, I've been looking for this for a while now. And to her, it just brought her so much joy, and you could tell. Whereas for someone else, when they see it, they may not appreciate what it meant to her. So when you're going through and sorting, be aware that, from their point of view, maybe something that they see is more important than what we may see. Another example of this might be like movie stubs. We found a stack of movie stubs, and it turns out that when our client was living in New York, she took her granddaughter to the movies, and those were all the movie stubs that she kept, and it meant a lot to her. Another example was when we did a floor plan for a client. She was going to move out of state, and she was very reasonable about what she wanted to take. She didn't want to take much. We brought furniture and things that meant a lot to her. But in addition to, she had an upright piano. And there was a lot of discussion about whether we should bring this upright piano or not, because our client had arthritis. And the daughter just felt like, no, we can't bring the piano because you'll never play it. And so as part of this conversation, the client was like, I know I'll never play this piano, but I used to play it a lot, and it brings me a lot of joy. And when we're working on the floor plan, because she was so practical in what she was bringing, there was actually space for it in her new community. So we brought it, but it brings her joy. And it wasn't too much from a safety standpoint. She could afford it. So they brought it. And to me, I think that's something that as you're talking about conversations, that's something that really important, is just to be practical about what you want to bring, but then also just know that it's their home, and you want to be aware and also really compassionate towards that. Nicole, did you have anything that you want to share with maybe a client or that you've worked with, or they're kind of talking about different things that they wanted to bring?
Before Nicole says anything, I just want to make sure everybody knows who Nicole is. Nicole is Director of Care Management at Aging Wisdom. And I just want you all to see her contact info and where she's from real quick, so everybody can see that. So she's been working with seniors for quite a few years. I started in hospice and medical social work. She has her master's of social work degree, and she's spent the last 15 years working as a care manager, which means someone who families call upon to manage the care of a person that they care about, person they love. So we're so excited to have you here today, Nicole.
Thanks so much for the introduction. It's nice to be back here this week and co-presenting with Mai. I certainly appreciate all that she's shared so far. I just need to give a little bit of a nod for working with a move manager. Mai and I have never worked together because we live in different states, but I have to say that most of the work that I do with clients, it's oftentimes a long-term relationship. So we see them all along the continuum. And when it gets to a point where we have to help a client move, we almost always bring in a senior move manager. I just feel like they're oftentimes an essential part of the team. There's so much involved in having to move someone. And I think, more than anything, the emotional work that's involved can be the most daunting task for not just the client themselves, but for the family or friends that are supporting them. So I think if there's practical things that you can hand off to someone who specializes in that area and knows what they're doing, it can just make the process so much more seamless and helpful. So I appreciate what you were just talking about, Mai, in terms of, the way I think of it, just not making any assumptions about what's important to someone or not. Oftentimes there's, personal items that for some reason have touched that person in such a big way. And so I think it's important to really honor that and be compassionate about that. I'm thinking of one client I worked with that lived in a very large home, and unfortunately it was a pretty severe hoarding situation, and we had to bring in a lot of help to tackle that process, to not just get the physical space cleaned up, but also to support her in that very challenging and difficult process. And her husband had died several years earlier. And the room that he was cared for and eventually died in was still very much intact. So all of the medical supplies and all of the things that he had needed there at end of life was still in that room. And it had been probably 15 years since he had passed. I remember somewhere along the way, her kind of panicking and wondering what happened to his wheelchair. And we had put his wheelchair aside. Fortunately, it hadn't been donated. It was still in the house. It had just been put aside. And for whatever reason, that wheelchair was so important to her. And she pleaded with us to be able to keep it. And I think it was just kind of a perfect example of how we would have overlooked something that mattered a whole lot to her and would have made a different decision. So very important point to make in terms of, taking into consideration the client's point of view and what is important to them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, that story. I really appreciate it. With this arm, interesting, I went to go back and visit her after the move just to see how she was doing, and she had the arm on a chair in a separate area, and you could tell that it just meant so much to her. And it was just, for me, that's just something that will always stick with me. It's just something where it's like, like you said, you just never assume what could be important to them. The next tip I have is to just give attention to detail. And we worked with a lady that moved here from out of state, and she was moving into assisted living, and she loved pictures, and that was her thing. That's my thing. And so I can definitely relate to that. Specifically, she had 3 boys, and on the left, that was her assisted living, one of the rooms in her assisted living where she had her 3 boys, and then a picture of her 3 boys. And then a few years later, when she moved to memory care, we used the 3 same pictures because we knew that it meant a lot to her. So if we could just identify 1 to 2 items that mean so much to them, it will help to make the transition so much more smooth. Again, for everyone, it's different. It's just listening in on what it is to them that's really important, so that it would be home to them. And so here's another one where this was after the move or done with the unpacking and organizing and setting up her home. She had lots of plants in her former house, lots of live plants. And so that was something that meant a lot to her. And she was okay with taking care of it every day. It just brought her a lot of joy. She, you know, we did pare down some of her plants, but so this is her finished room, is basically, you know, with the plants that she loves, that she, that brings her joy. So again, if we could just kind of just make sure that we're paying attention to our, you know, to our seniors and listening to them to see what's important to them, so that we can include that as part of the transition, that would help them to, you know, to help them to be able to thrive in their communities, making sure that they're happy and that they're in a safe place, but also in a place that they feel comfortable in, with all their things that brings them joy. Nicole, did you have anything that you wanted to share about this?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I was just sort of thinking about, actually, a lot of the clients that we work with are in the advanced stages of some sort of dementia, pretty severe cognitive impairment, and there's been some precipitating event, and maybe we've been trying to support them at home and that's no longer working and it's time to move, or there's been a hospitalization and they can't go back home. Depending on someone's abilities, when they have advanced dementia, as a lot of us probably know, we can't always engage them in the process in a meaningful or productive way. Mm-hmm. And I know in those types of situations, it can be really helpful to have the rooms set up when they arrive, where immediately they see some of those familiar and cherished items. So even though the setting is different, the hope is that if they walk in and see their favorite chair and the pictures hung up on the wall in the same location that they would have seen them from their view at home, I know that can be really helpful in terms of taking away some of that fear and anxiety about getting acclimated to a new environment, if those sort of personal touches from home are there waiting for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so attention to detail, really, really important. And again, that's, you know, what we rely on with our move managers that we partner with, is that attention to detail and just the expertise in recreating that space, even though it's a much smaller space, mm-hmm. recreating that space in a way where, you know, it looks like their living room or it looks like their bedroom, because things have been kind of laid out in a similar fashion. So very, very helpful tool.
Okay, thank you. And I really appreciate that you see the value in being able to recreate something like this, or just bringing things that will, especially for our clients that are in memory care. And this particular lady, she actually was, this is her memory care, her room in memory care. So, you know, she wasn't there the entire day. They had to have a caregiver take care of her. But then, you know, you can just imagine, you know, just going into a brand new room for the first time, because she had moments of clarity. She had moments where she could definitely know what was going on, but then she would always forget. But in those moments that she had the clarity, if you can imagine, where, you know, you're going into this new apartment and it's your home, and you can see really familiar items. I think that that's what a move manager would be able to do, is just kind of help through that transition to try to make it as seamless as possible, even though the situation is going to be really difficult regardless. So thank you for your feedback. My next one is for attention to detail, is just to make sure that you are careful before you throw things away or donate it. You know, where we put stuff is maybe different from where someone else may put stuff. And so we just want to make sure that we're just doing the due diligence to make sure we're not throwing anything away that's valuable. The picture on the left, the couple, you know, he had bought this gold medallion necklace, and he told me, he said we went on vacation and I hid it somewhere and I can't find it. And that was 20 years ago. So, you know, they had multiple families come and live with them and sort and take items that they wanted. But then with the remaining things after they moved, we helped them with the clear out. And we found this banker bag that had the gold medallion in it. So just make sure that you're looking through the items. And then on the top right, there was a jewelry box, and it was cleared out. There was nothing in it, but there was a special compartment in the back that had a lot of extra jewelry in it. And this is jewelry that they were looking for, but they never found because they didn't realize it was kind of in a hidden area. And so then the one on the bottom right is basically after the gentleman had passed away, the son contacted us and just said, we went through everything, just help us clear it all out. We really want to go ahead and help us with the grief process. They didn't want to physically continue to clear out his home. So in the desk, there was a bunch of paperwork, and we kind of just quickly go through it, but we found, thousands of dollars in matured bonds. So just make sure that when you are going through, just make sure that you're aware and kind of look through the items before you just, toss it. So I'm sure, Nicole, you probably have some stories for this.
Oh yeah, lots of stories. I was the client that I talked about earlier that had a pretty severe hoarding issue at home. I remember the person that was helping us clean out the house found this sort of secret place in the wall where her and her husband hid valuables. And I think it was so secret that I think most people would have overlooked it, but she just noticed a little something in the wall where they had actually cut a little opening. And, she pulled that out, and there was, jewelry, there was fine china, there was silver, lots and lots of valuables. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. So my last part is basically right here. This is my team and I. We're working with a client, helping him to declutter and organize his home. And we found this, and we were all amazed to see it, and we all wanted to take a selfie with it. So I would just tell you what it is for just lack of time. But basically what we found was a Grammy Award. And he had a few of them, like no big deal. He was so, just so humble. But yes, he was Academy Award winner. And just, when we're thinking about the whole downsizing and moving, the whole transition is really, really difficult. So we try to bring fun into it. You definitely want to, when you're talking with your family members, there's certain things that are really, really important. So safety is important. Finances are important. And their overall well-being is really important. But if there's certain things that you could just kind of work through just in a conversation, or be really practical about, or just have a more balanced approach, then just try to keep it a little bit lighter just because of the situation. What we always want to do is just keep it light and try to move things forward as much as we can with our clients. Here's a list of our services. For the pre-move, we do everything from creating the space plan to sorting, packing, arranging for the sale or donation of any remaining items. And then we also coordinate the move day. We do the complete unpack and set up and organize their home for them. And then additionally, we do the declutter and organizing if that's what they need help with. So that's all I really have for today. I wanted to see, Nicole, if you had any additional information that you wanted to share.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Benjamin, but I think we wanted to move into just talking about some tips as to how then help someone in their initial transition to a new environment. Yes. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about that. Obviously every situation is unique. And so we really need to think about, the context and the needs of the client to determine what ultimately they need to integrate successfully and smoothly into a new situation. Again, remembering that oftentimes there's been some big change in condition or some big precipitating event that's already been quite stressful. So making a move within that context doesn't always set people up for immediate success. So I think keeping that into perspective, that if it doesn't feel perfect in those first few days, that's normal and expected. Everyone needs to be given some time kind of on both ends, the client, the staff, the family. Everyone needs to be given some time to do some trial and error and get to know each other and figure out how to work out the kinks. One of the things that I always recommend to the families that I work with is, every facility probably has different protocols in terms of when they call meetings with the family or have what's oftentimes called a care conference. I typically advise families to ask for that proactively. Ask for a care conference within usually that first 30 to 45 days, because that can be a great opportunity, one, to get to know all the key players involved in your loved one's care. That way, if you have questions or concerns, you know who the appropriate point person is. It's also a great opportunity to get input from everybody in terms of how are things really going? What's working? What's not working? What do we need to do to remedy, any concerns that have arisen? One of the things that we see often is that we move someone into a community and we hear from the family. Every time mom calls, she's unhappy about this. She says this is wrong. She's complaining about this. But then when we talk to the facility staff, they have a different perspective. Well, gosh, your mom is going to all the activities. She's been complimentary of staff. She seems happy. She seems engaged. So there's two very different perspectives going on. And so oftentimes we have to be pretty discerning to tease out what exactly is going on. Oftentimes the family members are the recipient of kind of all those emotions that are coming up with the older adult. Maybe on a day-to-day basis, they are doing pretty well, but their family members are, they're that remaining connection to the outside world for, connected to the life that they used to have. And so all that normal and expected mourning that's happening and experience of all the loss of independence, loss of their home, loss of autonomy, that often comes up in those phone calls with family members. And I know that can be very challenging and difficult to know how to navigate, but I just try to impress upon the family members to really tease out what exactly is going on. If there's a lot of complaints that are being thrown at you, I think you have to figure out what's valid and what's an expression of an underlying emotion. So sometimes it's not trying to problem solve every little thing that feels wrong, but getting to that underlying emotion and recognizing that there's losses there's extreme grieving. And I think if you can attend to those emotions, oftentimes the sort of cascade of problems slowly go away. The other thing that I think is a kind of nice, helpful tip to think about is, for those clients that are coming from home that have had caregivers at home and maybe that's no longer working anymore, so they need to move. Usually there's at least one caregiver that has maybe been a longer term caregiver that client is especially bonded with. If it's an option, I think it can be nice to include that caregiver in maybe the first couple weeks, maybe even a month, to just help bridge a transition. So maybe what that looks like is they visit once or twice a week or whatever frequency makes sense. And it can kind of be a win-win because, one, for the client, it's a familiar person coming in to support them, to help them get comfortable and integrated into the community. It can be helpful to the family because it takes a little pressure off them if they can't visit or want to kind of hold off on visiting for a particular reason. And then two, I think it can also be helpful to facility staff because here's a person coming in that's worked with that client maybe for years, and they know the nuances, they know it works and doesn't work and what their preferences are. And that can be really valuable information in terms of figuring out how best to care for that resident. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, it's impossible to ignore the fact that right now our reality is quite different with the COVID situation. I know where I live here in Seattle and Washington State, facilities are not allowing visitors in. I'm assuming that's still the same in most places. The exception to the rule is that certain healthcare workers can come in, but family members are not able to visit. So moving someone under those circumstances has some complicating factors. I had to move a client about a month ago. She was living in an assisted living facility. Unfortunately, she needed a much higher level of care and needed to move to an adult family home. And it was heartbreaking for her daughter that she couldn't be involved in that process. We had to move her mom without her seeing her. And, it kind of makes me think of, sometimes people recommend that, you move a parent and you stay away for 2 weeks to help them get settled in. And I can't say I've always been a proponent of that approach. That being said, there have been some exceptions to the rule where, after some careful thought, that did make sense. But it's certainly not a blanket approach that I get behind. However, ironically, we're kind of being forced into doing that right now. Most people moving into facilities have to at least do a 2-week quarantine. And then, even beyond that 2 weeks, there's still restrictions in place where family can't visit. So we've been trying to really get up to speed on some of the technology that's available, or just finding ways to help family members connect with their loved ones who are either living already in a long-term care facility or need to move. One of the things that we're recommending is just good old-fashioned phone calls, just that kind of personal touch to help ground somebody, just some connection to the outside world. We've even encouraged family members to send letters or send care packages in the mail. For clients that are able to access technology, either independently or maybe with the assistance of a caregiver, there's lots of different options out there. I know some facilities have acquired iPads or tablets themselves to be able to help their residents make those connections with family members. One of the things that we've been looking at is a simplified tablet that's designed for older adults, where there's, some pretty basic functions that allow them to make video calls. The other thing that I really love is those digital photo frames where family members and friends can upload pictures. So there's just kind of a revolving slideshow of pictures. So just, lots of little ways to help people maintain that connection to the outside world, even if we can't visit them right now.
Question. So for both of you, I'd love to just hear let's say your family has just finished moving mom in, and now it's time to say goodbye. Let's start with assisted living and then think about memory care next. What do you do? How do you make that first goodbye? And while they're thinking of their answer, folks on this event today, we're thankful you're here. This is the time you can absolutely ask questions of our specialists today. So please type your questions in. I'll read your questions to them. But anyway, how would you answer that, Mai?
So when our clients are moving into assisted living, one of the things we always encourage them to do is while we are getting them set up, then to go ahead and spend that time with them that day, just so they can have that time together, whether they're eating breakfast or just walking around the community, meeting new people. Now, this is obviously before the coronavirus. And so generally, our family members are very involved with just helping them to get acclimated to meet with people. And because of that, knowing that they're in a safe, comfortable new home, then they can be able to, say goodbye and talk about, the next visits and things like that. So, in general, I would think that if you, just kind of make a plan to continue, like Nicole said, definitely to check in on them, to see how they're doing, to make sure that that they are taken care of and that all their concerns are addressed, then it helps to, it'll help the conversation for you to say goodbye and then to come back again to visit later.
And how about you, Nicole? How do you actually say goodbye, especially if it's been a tough conversation where they didn't even want to be there in the first place?
Right. And those are most often the clients that we're working with. So I feel that there always needs to be a coordinated effort with the staff and the facility to understand what is it going to look like when I show up with my mom and then when I have to leave. Is there a staff member who can kind of jump in and kind of move her onto an activity or move her onto a meal where it's going to be a little bit easier for me to say goodbye and gradually remove myself from the situation? That almost always helps. And if you're moving into the right long-term care facility, staff know how to do this. They've done this many times. They're experienced, they're compassionate, and they're going to be that person on the other end that's supporting you. And oftentimes they're the ones that kind of make eye contact with the family member and kind of give them that nod and say, like, it's time, you can go. Because I know, even if there's a plan in place beforehand, there's a script perhaps, I know when the family member gets there and there's emotions involved and they're feeling guilt or they're, feeling whatever feeling, it can be really hard to walk away. So having a staff member at the other end help with that is absolutely essential. I think diversion always works too. I think what's harder is, if you're sitting in the room with your mom and trying to figure out a way to, leave, I think that can be a lot harder as opposed to let's sit down and meet these other residents and have lunch together. And while that conversation's happening, you can, find an opening to say your goodbyes and leave because they're supported by other people who are around who can continue that conversation. Similarly, if there's some activity going on in the building that would be of interest to them, going to an activity together, spending a few minutes there, engaged in that activity with the group, and then, kind of finding your opening to go. And then, I think lastly, if, there's some resistance or they're, having a hard time saying goodbye, I think letting them know what to expect, kind of leaving them with something to look forward to. I'm going to call you tonight after dinner, or I'm going to visit in the morning. Making sure they know the next thing that's happening. You're going to finish up lunch and this nice nurse is going to take you back to your room, kind of leaving them with something that grounds them a little bit so they don't feel so lost.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Well, we have reached 11:50, so we have got to let our friends go back to whatever they are doing. But thank you, Mai. Thank you, Nicole. If anyone would like to connect with Nicole or Mai with more questions or talk to them about their particular area of expertise, there is a poll up right now. If you click yes on either or both of their names, I'll make sure that they get your contact info and you can talk with them. Next week, we are looking at our last episode in which we will be discussing, okay, they're living there, they're situated at assisted living or memory care. How, when I come to visit, how do I make sure that my visit's positive? And the title, of course, to that is, do you like it here? Which is really the worst question to ask, right? That's really why we put that as the title, because that's not the focus of a visit. Is the food good? Do you like it? Are you sleeping? Whereas so many families will come into the setting, and that's what they're asking, is all those kind of questions, and the visit turns into a pretty sour, awful experience pretty quickly. So we're going to be talking with some folks who have a lot of experience in actually how do you have great visits, and then how do you advocate for care changes or better quality care in tough situations. So again, thank you, Mai. Thank you, Nicole. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a part of this from all across the country.
Take care.